Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Lost, Season 6, Part 1. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review every episode of Lost in parts. In this video, I will cover episodes 1 through 7 of Season 6 of Lost. So I am splitting Season 6 up into 3 parts. So this is the first part out of 3 that will cover Season 6 of Lost. So I'll have to give a spoiler warning for Lost up to Season 6, Episode 7. If you haven't seen up to that point, you will not want to watch any of this video, otherwise things will be spoiled for you. However, if you have not seen beyond Season 6, Episode 7, not to worry, this video will not contain spoilers beyond that episode, but I will have a spoiler section at the end of the video that will cover those who have seen up to the very end of Lost. Now, I know this is all Season 6, so maybe I should just get straight into Season 6 spoilers, but no, I'm going to actually keep this spoiler-free up to Episode 7, because the video only covers up to Episode 7, and that is going to restrict me a lot, particularly regarding the Flash Sideways. A lot of that discussion I'll have to save for my spoiler section, but I want to keep to the format of not going beyond spoilers beyond the episode I'm reviewing. Anyway, Season 6 of Lost. Now, if you probably heard my opinion if you've been watching my videos. I don't care for Season 6 of Lost. I really don't like it. I think it is by far the worst season of Lost, and I don't think it, quite frankly, holds up to the high quality of other seasons. And this is not an uncommon opinion. I mean, I suppose a lot of people will actually cut off the point where Lost stopped being good earlier, if anything. I've heard people say as far back as Season 1 was the only good season, or up to Season 1 and 2 were the only good seasons, and then the show stopped being good after Season 3, and then some people say the show stopped being good after Season 4. If you know me, I say the show stopped being good halfway through Season 5. So the last half of Season 5 was not a fan, and Season 6 I was even less of a fan of. And I really am struck by that rewatching on the rewatch, how it feels like a different show. It seems it just does not have the high quality of writing and intrigue and just character development that really engaged me throughout the first 4.5 seasons. Now, the thing is when Season 6 first came out, I really wanted to like the season, and I wasn't that down on Season 5 at the moment, because mostly I say the last half of Season 5 was not good. That's mostly looking at it in retrospect, having seen the whole show and where they take things. But when this was airing, I didn't really have that big of an issue with Season 5. In fact, I still love the first half. So when Season 6 first aired, I was really on board with it, particularly this first set of episodes. It wasn't until towards the end of the season that I started realizing that something was wrong. So for this first set of episodes, I remember rating them much, much highly when they first came out, as opposed to how I'm rating them now, which I do admit is all in retrospect, knowing where they take things, which unfortunately, as I said, I'll have to save most of that discussion for my spoiler section. But anyway, let me jump straight into the episodes, and let's start with the first two-parter. I'll cover it all at once. The first 2 episodes of the season, LAX. Now, or is it LAX? But anyway, yeah, so let's talk about these Flash Sideways a bit, just a little bit. I'll have to get more detail in the spoiler section, but because I had been spoiled in between seasons, because Season 5 ended on the huge cliffhanger of, Juliet hitting the bomb and going off, so what happens? I mean, we pretty much all guessed that they would just blow our characters back into the present, even though it doesn't really make any sense how they never explain how that happens. I guess this is another "the island did it" excuse. But we'd never expected because Jack's goal was to reboot the show. Basically, his goal was to reset the timeline, change the timeline so that A15 never crashed on the island. And no one expected this, or at least no one I knew expected this. Some people feared that this might be the case, which I thought would be horrible because we don't want a reboot of the show. This is something that Fringe, I believe they did it after this show did it, and it was horrible. You don't reset and erase the entire 5 years of the show that you liked. It's really against it. Now, I got spoiled from production leaks that they were filming scenes that showed a different version of events of 815 not crashing, that it landed safely in LA. But I also learned from production leaks that they were continuing the storyline as it's been going since season 5 with the On Island storyline as things going forward. So I knew that there would be 2 parallel stories going, one set in a world where 815 didn't crash, and one set in that just carries on from the timeline we've been following the whole time. And I thought that was a decent compromise, to be honest. At first, I had no issue with that. I know a lot of people were really iffy about it. And in fact, I remember when I first watched this episode, LAX, I was excited as hell. I was over the moon. I thought, wow, this is amazing when they showed this flash sideways of Jack in the plane. And I was like, oh, Desmond's on the plane. What's going on? This is great. And the reason why I thought it would be a really good idea to actually see a version of events where A15 didn't crash is because it would show there was some storylines, particularly involving Jen and Son. That's the one I was interested in the most. But there's some, and then there's Kate, but there's some storylines that it seemed like it could have went in a different direction had they never crashed, or Claire, or whatever it is. So it would be interesting to see this alternate version where they never crashed. But the thing is, and it started worrying me through this episode, but it gets even worse throughout the season, which I'll cover in later videos. But the thing is that the more that they change things to have things differently, the less I was interested, because this isn't just a different version where the plane never crashed. A lot of their characters' backstories is inherently different, such as Hurley saying that he's the luckiest man alive, Desmond being on 815, I know they don't reveal this till later, but Jack having a son, and Shannon not being on the plane with Boone, and as I said, these changes get worse throughout the season, and the more they do it, the less I cared about the Flash Sideways, because I'm not seeing a version of what would have happened to our characters if the plane never crashed, because the whole situation and the whole characters are different. They just changed everything, and to me that ruined it. I thought it would have worked a hell of a lot better had they just kept to a straightforward, everything's the same except plane didn't crash. Now granted, they showed the island underwater at the start, so having the island underwater will change some characters' backstories who were involved with the island, such as Ben, and we see Ethan later or whatever, then that's fine. But most of the main characters, A15 survivors, Jack, Locke, all of them, their backstories wouldn't, Jack wouldn't magically have a son because the island was underwater. So, and Hurley wouldn't say, oh, well, Hurley was infected by the numbers, and numbers came from the island. So that perhaps, but I still would rather they leave that alone. So yeah, and that's just, in this episode alone, it just kind of edged at the back of my mind. But in retrospect, seeing where they took things, yeah, I don't like this episode as much anymore. I barely like it, I would say. I would just say it just barely makes it to okay. When this episode first came out, I would say it's great, amazing, and I put it up as one of the best episodes. But now I'm just like, I don't know. I don't get much enjoyment from it. The island storyline, I mean, it's okay, I guess, but I can still see that drop in quality from previous seasons. And I talked about in some previous videos how having none of the characters be in the present time, except, I mean, we get this little short storyline with Ben and Son at the end of season 5, but other than that, there's really this 3-year gap of the island where none of our characters were present, because even those who stayed behind on the island were back in the 70s. And so they all come back to the present, and it just seems very disconnected. It seems like a strange place to me. It's not like season 4 where I was following this group of survivors on an island, and it was a well-established storyline, well-established place, and it was everything was very clear. But now, like, some of the survivors return, we don't even know why, and other people trapped and stuff, we don't really know what their motivations are, and it's particularly when the people were in the 70s coming back to this timeline, like, what? Well, everything feels so disconnected. And then you have, like, Hurley is talking to Jacob. I mean, I suppose that's the thing I do kind of like about this episode, that Hurley sort of becomes in charge because he's talking to Jacob, and I love how Miles is just like, well, he's in charge now for some reason. And the one thing I will say that I do like about season 6 overall as a whole, which I'll get more into, is Jack's character story. And in fact, I've heard other people who trashed the show, other reviews trashed the show, thought that they ruined Jack's character. I actually disagree. Jack's character story is probably one of the few things that I do like about season 6. And what I like about it in this episode is the fact that he's gone from the rigid, having to control everything, be the leader and be in charge, to letting go, to just letting Hurley Hurley's like, I know what's going on, so I should I should let me lead. And he's like, okay, fine, you know what you're doing, you do it. And I love that. I think that's a great character beat for Jack. Now, as far as Sawyer, him threatening to kill Jack, that seemed kind of pointless, just there to add tension to the episode. He doesn't actually follow through. I mean, it does make sense that he would be really upset over losing Juliet. Yeah, and then what else have we got? We got the reveal that Not Locke is the smoke monster, which, I kind of already knew. I kind of figured that one out already, because we know it's not Locke, so who else could it be? And we know the smoke monster can take the form of the dead. It did it before Christian Shepherd and with Yemi, so it seemed pretty obvious to me. But at least I like how they flat out told you, and of course they had Bram and all those other people who were the Lana. Fuck them, kill them all. Now, I will complain a lot about how their use of just killing off side characters in this season is definitely the worst, but this is one case I don't really mind, because nobody really cared about those guys anyway. So plus that was a really cool scene with the smoke monster killing them all, and then he beats up Richard and takes off, so you don't know what the hell is going on. And then, of course, Ben coming to terms that he was manipulated, which is actually a pretty powerful story beat for Ben, because Ben's usually the manipulator. And to realize that he was manipulated into killing Jacob for the smoke monster is... But I do find it inconsistent to believe that Ben knew nothing about the smoke monster, because his whole thing was living on the island, worship the island. He implied to Jack and the others that he knew about the smoke monster, but apparently he knows nothing, Jon Snow. But anyway, yeah, what else do I have to say about this episode? The others. The temple. So this is something I was really looking forward to. They first name dropped the temple in season 3, and the whole time I was like, oh, let's see the temple, let's see the temple. And they kind of teased it in season 5 by showing the temple wall and like the cavern underneath. But here we finally get to go full on into the temple, and nah. I mean, I think the reason why I was so disappointed is because they were building it up for so long. If you're going to build something out for so long, you have to have a huge payoff, not just be, it's a temple, and here's some dudes. And like, the promotional material referred to them as others, because one of them had a turban on. Ooh. I like how they others. They seem just like others, but they're just at the temple instead of not at the temple. How does that know? And Cindy or whatever is there. I mean, because they have her in the flash sideways on the plane, so why not have her in the present times too? And we have, I guess the difference between this group is it seems like this group is more like Dogon is the leader. Like it's more, it seems more spiritual than what it seems like. They're almost two factions of the same group, and that Dogon controlled those at the temple and Ben controlled those who were living in Dharmaville. But then, at the end of season 3, Ben's like, oh, let's all go to the temple. So what would have happened if Ben went with them? Maybe that's why Ben didn't go with them, because he knew that Dogon would sort of be fighting him for power. I don't know. And I think a lot of the tension at the temple, like Dogon threatening to kill them, and demanding to know the names. It's like Hurley is just like, oh, Jacob sent us, so they didn't kill him. And then he was like, Dogon asked for proof, and Hurley was like, oh, I don't know. So they threatened to kill him again, and then he's like, oh, the guitar. This seems all artificial. Like, why is... I don't get why Dogon and those others would threaten to kill anyone like that just because they're 815 survivors. Like, and if really, because what we learn later is that they're candidates and that's why they don't get killed. But if Jacob had them as candidates this whole time, and Dogon and these others are Jacob's loyal followers, why didn't Jacob fucking tell them? Well, like, why would they threaten to kill anyone? Wouldn't they know that maybe these people are at the island because Jacob sent them there? Because they seem to worship the island. They should know that a lot of people were brought to the island for a purpose. So why just kill off any random people who show up to the island? Doesn't seem like a smart policy to me. I don't know. Just the whole thing with the temple seems like fake tension. And the whole thing with the stupid magical pool where they bring Saeed back to life. I mean, I guess I'll get more into that in later episodes. Anyway, yeah, this episode was okay. It was fine. I don't think it was particularly good or particularly bad, particularly in retrospect. Anyway, let me get to the next episode, which is What Kate Does. Now, I remember this episode quite poorly, this episode being quite bad, and it's actually one of the lowest rated episodes on IMDb. But watching it again, I actually don't think it's all that bad. It's certainly not very good, but relatively speaking, I think there's been worse episodes. I think the worst part of it, and probably what sticks in people's crawls, are the flash sideways scenes with Kate and Claire, which were kind of really boring. I hated what they did. Again, this is the changing characters' backstories. I hated what they did with Claire by having it so... it was just some random people who wanted to adopt her baby, and the husband left, so she no longer wanted to adopt, which it doesn't make sense. I know people had a lot of theories when it comes to the psychic, and Damon Lindelof later will, oh, the psychic was just a liar, blah blah blah, he was just a con man. That's what we made clear in the show. But the show is making it clear throughout that storyline doesn't make sense, and so they sabotaged that storyline to end because they made it prove that it doesn't make any fucking sense. Because why would people in LA pay all this amount of money to send a baby all the way from Sydney so they can adopt it, when they can just adopt another baby much cheaper in America? I know the adoption process is a hard, long, expensive process, but surely if they wanted to pay someone to that much money to pay for their expenses, they could have found someone a lot closer and a lot cheaper. It just doesn't make any sense. The only thing that does make sense to me, if there was some existential island motive involved, which is what it was implied, and to say that that's not the case is just lazy. It's just bad writing. It's too lazy to come up with anything interesting. It's not good writing. But anyway, and the actual episode when Kate and Claire, she kidnaps the cab and they start to bond again, blah, 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 blah. And then, oh, look, Ethan's the doctor. Isn't that creepy? And this is what kind of annoys me about the Flash Sideways, particularly on the rewatch, is that they always just show known characters we've seen in the show before, and whenever they pop up, they play that doom doom, that music, and that music is so annoying. It's like, yes, music, I know this is a character I know, and they're in a situation they shouldn't be. I'm aware of this. You don't need to give me a musical cue every fucking time this happens. It's so annoying. And ooh, look, and it's too much of a ooh, look, there's Ethan, and this happens way too much throughout the season. I think this is something they sort of tease, like, oh, we're going to see all these characters that you love, they're going to come back for season 6. But they're just coming back as totally different versions of their character in the story. Alright, I'll talk more about this in my Flash Sideways, but a story that doesn't really matter. Anyway, in my spoiler section, Anyway, but that being said, like, the island storyline in this episode is actually kind of decent. I actually kind of could get, like, Kate trying to connect with Sawyer, and Sawyer being too heartbroken, and like his saying how much he loved Juliet. Like, those emotional scenes did work, but on the other hand, I felt disconnected from Sawyer's relationship with Juliet, because most of it happened off screen. In season 5, it's just like in a flash, boom, they've been lovers for 3 years. So I don't feel the connection to the characters the same way I would feel a connection to like a Kate-Jack relationship, even though they were only together for like several months. But because we see more of that on screen and the development more, as an audience, you have more. You connect more with it than the Sawyer and Juliet, but you can still sort of, and plus Sawyer's character is so different than what he was for the first 5 seasons, or at least 4.5 seasons of the show, that he seems like a totally different person, which you can't again identify with him. But I still thought they were sort of emotionally poignant scenes, shall we say. And the storyline with Dogon and Jack, and Dogon trying to get Saeed to take the pill because he's evil. I'll get more into that later. Those scenes were interesting. I did like how Jack could tell something was up with Dogon, and he refused to give Saeed the pill, and eventually just took it himself, and Dogon had to like attack him and get him to spit it out because he didn't want Jack to die. Yeah, those are intriguing scenes. So overall, I'd say this episode was decent. Oh, I think this is also where we get the reveal of Aldo, where the guy was appeared briefly in season 3, was like being really pissy with Kate. I don't know about that, but anyway, like, not a good episode certainly, but it's not one of the worst either. We've had worse. Anyway, let me get to the next episode, which is The Substitute. I remember when this episode first came out, I loved it. I probably put it in my top 10. Now I just say it's okay, knowing what I know in retrospect. I will say I still like the reveal with the cave and the candidates, because I do like the concept of the candidates. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think this reveal was actually quite powerful. The way that Knotlock takes Sawyer down to the cave and shows him that Jacob sort of arranged for all of them to come there because they're all candidates to replace him. which I actually thought was a really powerful reveal. We also follow Alana and Peter's and son Ben as they, deal with the aftermath of Jacob's death, and they bury Locke's body, and they have the weirdest funeral that Lapita says the weirdest funeral I've ever been to. That was kind of funny though, how Ben was just like, Locke was a believer, he was a great man, I'm sorry I killed him. Or sorry I murdered him, and everyone just looks at him like, what? So it was, I don't know, I did something about that I did kind of like, but again, all this has like lesser quality storytelling than previous seasons. I do have to re-emphasize that. Even though this stuff is decent, I just feel really disconnected from all of it. And then there's Richard Alpert, who, we find out why the smoke monster beat him up and took him. It's because he's recruiting and he wants people on his side, and Alpert actually wants nothing to do with him. And he runs away and tells Sawyer to run away, but Sawyer doesn't listen to him. And it's okay. It was pretty decent. As I said, I did really like the reveal at the end with the cave. But what I didn't like about this episode is the flash sideways, of course. And these ones were particularly boring, with Locke trying to. And this is what really fucking annoys me about this, though, is that. I guess I'll get more into this not Locke smoke monster thing. I think the whole concept, I think this is the reveal where Alana says in this episode that the reason why the smoke monster stuck in Locke's form is because Jacob died or something, and so he can't change form. He can change form to smoke, but he can't change form to another human being for some reason. Why is this plot? Because they want to keep Terry O'Quinn in the show. That's it. That's simple. And so this episode has a flash sideways from Locke, but Locke is dead. On the island, we see the character and they do the flash sideways off of him, but it's not the same fucking character. It's just he's taking Locke's form, and yet he's saying this is a Locke episode, and that really bothers me. It really bothers me how they, and throughout the rest of the season, people call him Locke. They'll refer to him as Locke when they all know he's not Locke. Its fans started calling him Flock. I personally preferred the less popular term, not Locke. But no one on the show called him. Everyone on the show just called him Locke when clearly he isn't. He's kind of the opposite of Locke. It's just the smoke monster taking his form. They should have come up with a different name. I think at one point later in the season, Sawyer name drops Flock, which was sort of a nod to the audience nickname for him, but really they never really say that, and they just call him Locke. And the show, and I guess I'll touch more on this as this season 6 goes on, but the show really tries to play up this whole conflict between Jack and Locke because they want symmetry between season 6 and season 1. And season 1, a lot of people sort of gravitated towards the conflict between Jack and Locke, and that Locke was sort of portrayed a bit more as a villain, so that's why they turned the main villain into Locke. But it's not really Locke, it's just someone taking his form, because we know that Locke isn't a villain. So I think this really, I hate that. I think that was a really cheap way to try to play off of people's nostalgias and try to connect the shows, the beginning and the end of the shows together. I don't think it works, because we know that this isn't Locke. And to try to just pretend and say, oh, he's stuck in this form is bullshit. Anyway, the flash sideways, and when we follow Locke and we see that Helen is still there and they're going to get married. All this stuff was boring. I'm sorry. I mean, the only thing I kind of liked about it was that Randy Nation's being a dick. He's like, okay, John, hey, man, you're fired. like, I don't know. Kind of like him. That guy's a douche. Anyway, so overall this episode was, again, I like the reveal with the cave, so I'm going to say it's okay. It's decent. Alright, so let me get to the next episode, which is Lighthouse. It's funny because I remember this episode being particularly bad. In fact, I remember at some stage putting it in like my bottom 5 or considering for one of the worst episodes of the show. Watching it again, I actually realized it's not that bad. It's actually much better than I remember it being. I think part of the reason now, this is like almost the opposite of some of the early episodes I talked about where I loved when they first came out, where this episode I didn't like when it first came out, and now, in retrospect, I don't think it's that bad. And the reason why I didn't like it when it first came out, because I was expecting some huge reveal. I was expecting this is season 6, and this is something that will happen continually, because I kept expecting, we're going to get this huge shocker, this nuclear bomb drop that's going to change our whole perspective of the show, and it never happens. Really, not really. And this episode, I was sure from watching the preview, this is because we see Jack at this cool lighthouse thing, and he's freaking out, yelling at Hurley, and I was like, oh my god, we're going to get this huge reveal. And they just recapped what they already revealed in the previous episode. Jacob brought them there to be candidates. Duh, we already fucking knew this one. But watching it in retrospect, knowing that there will be no great reveal ever this season, watching in retrospect, I'm able to I'm not disappointed by that, so I'm able to appreciate the nuance of the episode. Particularly, I do mostly appreciate the Owen Island storyline with Jack and Hurley. I like the interaction between these two, and again, I think it's a cool pairing to have Jacob be the one who communicates through Hurley, and so Hurley's like, dude, Jack, we have to go, and he's like, no, I'm not going anywhere with you, but he has to tell him, you have what it takes, which is of course quoting his dad, and just the interactions between the two can be quite funny and interesting. But I do love how, again, I think Jack's character story is one of the positive aspects of the season, and that's explored here, and how he is more willing. He hasn't completely torn himself over to the island. In fact, the incident, I was going to say the incident with, but it's actually called the incident, where he thought he was going to change the timeline, where that didn't work. It seemed to hurt his spirits, and he, in this episode he says, well, I don't know, I came back to the island because I thought it would heal me, because I was broken, and it didn't heal me. So he was expecting a quick fix, so he was kind of down on his luck that it wasn't getting it, but he has to get this. He's starting to get revelation that Jacob brought everyone there for the island for the purpose, and that's why Jacob wanted him to see the lighthouse. And of course, his first reaction was to freak the fuck out. But as we see in the next episode, he starts to accept this and starts to change his worldview, and he becomes more of a believer in the island. And I will stand firm behind this storyline. I've heard other people trash it. I actually really liked it. I think it was one of the better things about this really bad season of an otherwise what used to be a great show. So to see that explored more and to see the interactions with Hurley, like the moment where Jack was yelling at Hurley and I was like, what is going on? And Hurley, of course, doesn't know anything. So Jack just breaks the lighthouse. It's funny. And of course, when Jacob says, someone's coming to the island, of course we find out a couple episodes later that someone is Widmore, but I'll cover that more in future videos. But it just seems weird that they're making such a big deal. Widmore's coming to the island when he doesn't really do much. But anyway, as I said, I'll cover that in future videos. But the Flash Sideways is why I didn't like this episode. The Flash side, of course. And it is interesting that Jack's son is played by Clay from 13 Reasons Why. He looks so much younger here. Now, this isn't a surprise to me, because when I first saw 13 Reasons Why, I was like, hey, it's Jack's son. Like, as soon as I saw him. But it was kind of a shock watching it again to see how young he looks. Of course, I think this is almost a decade before, maybe 6 years before 13 Reasons Why, so of course he's going to look a lot younger as a teenager. I don't know. I just found this stuff with the son boring. And again, the more they change things in this Flash sideways, the less I care. And so, ooh, Jack has a son, and he is with the ex-wife. And I'm like, well, this isn't the Jack I know. Why the fuck should I care about this? What does this have to do with anything? But then we also get the side plot with Claire. She's turned into the next Rousseau. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just a bit iffy on that whole idea. And they just go out of their way. And again, this is probably trying to get symmetry to season 1. They go out of their way to make Claire specifically like Rousseau, to have her so she's had her baby stolen, she thinks, by the others, and she's pining over her baby. She's setting booby traps. Like, when did Claire become this expert, like, outdoors person who was able to set booby traps when did this happen? I guess we're meant to believe the smoke monster taught her all to do this, and she's like an expert killer or whatever. It's just, I don't know. It's too drastic of a change. I don't care. There's a 3-year gap. I just don't buy this character change. I think it's too much of a contrived way to bring Rousseau back and to do something with Claire, with a character that obviously they didn't know what the hell to do with, which is why they wrote her off the show for 2 seasons. No, and from my recollection, no one really cared about her return. But anyway, so yeah, this episode is another episode I would actually say is decent, mainly for the Jack stuff. I mean, the Claire, see, even though I hate the idea of them making Claire another Rousseau, the scenes we actually get in this episode with her and Jen were actually entertaining. Like, they were somewhat engaging to watch. It was somewhat tense to see this crazy person that Jen used to know, and him being this precarious situation. So overall, I'd say that this episode is decent. So anyway, let me get into the next episode, which is, what is the next episode? Sundown. Alright, so this is the first episode I'm getting to this season, which I will outright say sucks. And that is quite surprising, because when this episode first came out, I did claim to really like it and for it to be good. But I don't, it's not just that I'm judging it in retrospect. I think it also has more to do that when I first came out, I was kind of Phantom Menacing a bit, because I wanted to love this season so much and I wanted to like it. And on the surface level, this does seem like a very powerful episode, particularly that scene at the end where Kate and all of them are walking through the rubble of the smoke monster that killed all the others there, and they had that creepy Catch the Falling Star song playing, and they're very creepy. Like this, on an aesthetic level, that was a very good scene and very well done scene. And then you have a lot of action sequences and suspense, I should say, throughout the episode. But issue is, if you look beneath that surface level, the whole story is a fucking mess. It makes no sense. First of all, alright, so this whole thing about Saeed being evil, I think is dumb. It's not very clearly developed, and it's never clearly established what exactly happened to Saeed, and I think the whole concept is terrible throughout the entire season. And because earlier we got scenes with Dogon torturing Saeed and trying to poison him, and then Saeed shows up and being like, oh, I'm a good person, and then Dogon tries to kill him. Alright, let me get into an issue I have. So Dogon at first asked Jack to give him the pill to kill him, and he even said to Jack, eventually once he figured it out, he said, I think it would be better. No, he says to Saeed in this episode, I think it would be better if you were dead. And in this episode, he attacks him and tries to kill him, and then he stops and falls short. I'll get back to that stopping and falling short later. But, he was he gave Jack the pill. So as far as he knew, Saeed would be dead. And when Saeed, Jack, Hurley, and Jen, when they first showed up, he threatened to kill them all. And when Hurley said, oh, Jacob sent me, he paused, but when he refused to show proof, he threatened to kill them again. So he's perfectly willing to wipe them out and kill them. That's established. Now, he found out that they're candidates, that's why he didn't kill them, but he knows that Saeed is evil. So it doesn't matter that he's a candidate because he's evil now. And he even says this outright, I think it would be better if you were dead. So why the fuck doesn't he kill him? It's easy. Why doesn't he get his goons? Because it's been established there's all these goons that take orders from him with guns that go around and they threaten to kill people, that hold him hostage. Get those goons to kill him. Simple. No one's going to be able to stop him. Saeed's not going to be able to stop him. Goons, come here. You have 5 people with guns go. Nothing Saeed's going to be able to do about that. He'll be dead. He'll be dead. So, so this whole thing is nuts, and the whole others with guns throughout this episode seem completely useless and pointless and not doing their fucking jobs right. But I'll touch more into that later. And now let me get back to the whole thing about Dogon falling short. He says it's because he had a son. He tells a story about his son later on, and that it's sort of. That's supposed to explain why he didn't kill Saeed, because he's a good guy at heart, or he's thought about his son. But no, I'm not buying that. If he thinks Saeed is evil, then he will kill him. And then he apparently works. This scene was very confusing to me, and I think because it's very badly written and it makes no sense. When he sends Saeed out to kill Notlock, to kill the smoke monster, I think the narrative we're given and we're expected to believe is that he wanted the smoke monster to kill Saeed, and so that's why he sent Saeed to kill the smoke monster, because he expected as soon as he put the dagger through Notlock that he would kill him, but that's not what happens. Instead, he recruits him. He should have fucking seen that coming if that was the case. If you want to say dead, then just fucking kill him. If you don't want to personally do it yourself because of your son, wherever, which I don't buy, fine. Have your goons come in and have them kill him. Like sending, because that's no different. You might say, he doesn't want to have his goons kill him. Why not? How is that any different from sending him out to be killed by the smoke monster? It's not. So, and he should know that by sending him out to smoke monster, he's risking, especially if he's evil. He's evil. He knows that he's corrupted by the smoke monster. So why is he going to send someone who is evil out to his master so they can be evil together? It's so frustrating. It makes no sense. Now there is the counter argument that maybe he wasn't sending Saeed out to die. Maybe there was a chance that Saeed could have killed the smoke monster, because he says, you take this knife, stab him before he says anything. He says if he says anything to you, it's already too late. And in the actual episode, he does say, hello, Saeed, before Saeed actually stabs him. So he did say something to him. So you could say, oh, maybe there's some magical rules that Saeed would have been able to harm him had he not said anything. But I don't actually think that's the case, because there's nothing established or mentioned later in the season that would imply that's the case. Everything that is implied later on is that the smoke monster can't be killed and he's invincible, which, by the way, I think was a stupid story decision that makes this season a lot less interesting, because there's absolutely no stakes when the smoke monster attacks people because he's invincible. It's boring, but I'll get more into that in later videos as well. And so Saeed comes back and he gives the ultimatum, and he's like, look, you'll have to leave by sundown or, smoke monster's going to kill you. And they don't immediately lock Saeed up and arrest him. Why? They know he's evil. He just gave them an evil ultimatum, so he knows that he's in league with the smoke monster now. First of all, just kill him. Get your guns out and kill him. Secondly, if you don't want to do that for whatever reason, which doesn't make any sense to me, because they established, he said, I think it would be better if you were dead. So why the fuck is he still alive? So, but at the very least, the least you could do, handcuff him, lock him in that hole with Claire, or give him his own special hole, or whatever. Why is he running around free? And Dogon's just sitting there having a casual conversation with him, even though he knows that he's evil, and talking about it, giving his backstory about his son. And then is he shocked when fucking Saeed kills him. And this is kind of, it's like another Jacob thing, because I like how next episode calls out how Jacob seemed like Ben thought Jacob wanted to die. But Miles was like, no, he wanted to live. But it seems like he did because he was being an idiot. He was just in there, what about you? Which is obviously going to get him killed. And Dogon's doing the same thing. He's like casually sitting there next to an evil murderer, not doing anything to protect himself, not having any guards or anything. And he's that shocked when Saeed drowns him. Now, you can't tell me that Dogon wanted Saeed to kill him, even though it seems that way because he's being such a fucking moron in this scene. But it can't be the case, because with Dogon dead, that's what allows the smoke monster to storm the temple. Apparently the smoke monster couldn't get to the temple as long as Dogon's alive. That goes against established rules, because we see clearly it was established in LAX when the dude Bram put that sand, the ash or whatever around the circle of ash, that the smoke monster can't get through it. We've seen clearly they were putting circles of ash around the temple. So how is it that Dogon being dead suddenly overrules the ash? Like this, here's the thing: when you're writing a fantasy show or a fantasy novel, it's fine to have crazy rules. That's the whole point of fantasy. You can have crazy rules like a circle of ash and makes you impervious to attack from the smoke monster. Like that makes sense. That's how fantasy works. You establish rules. But the thing with fantasy, and this is what frustrated me about people who would make the excuse of why Game of Thrones suck, how they started throwing all logic out in the last couple of seasons. People would be like, it's a fantasy! No, you moron. That's not how fantasy works. Fantasy doesn't mean you just do whatever the fuck you want. Fantasy means you have a set rules that you have to establish, and you have to stick to the rules. So I don't mind saying that the ash can protect the temple, but you're breaking your rules with no explanation. Now all of a sudden, actually the ash needs Dogon to work, which has never been established. Like, Dogon wasn't fucking there at the cabin that had ash around it. He wasn't fucking there with Bran when he put ash around himself. So why the fuck is the ash no good just because Dogon's dead? That makes no sense. And plus, if Dogon knew that if he died, everyone else would die, why is he being so flippant and letting Saeed kill him like this? And the interpreter's just as bad. He goes right up, oh, you idiot, don't you realize what you've done? Stab. Of course he stabs you. If someone just killed, you're not going to be like, oh, you idiot, what have you done? You're going to be like, hey, guards, get in here and shoot this fucker. That's what you're going to do. This is such terrible writing. And I don't think there's any excuse for it. People might, I'm sure there's some apologists for the show out there who try to come up with, oh, actually, this is why they're doing this. No, there's no excuse. This is terrible writing, plain and simple. It's very contrived to get to this certain dark situation, which again I think is on an aesthetic level was really cool, but it's undermined by the fact that the logic just does not hold up at all in the bit. And then you get Saeed's turn to evil just happens all of a sudden. Like, at first he's like, oh, I'm a good man, oh, and I trust you, Saeed, and then at the end of the episode he's like, I can't be saved. And it's like, oh god, this is such bad writing. I'm sorry, but it is. And I haven't even got to the Saeed flash sideways yet, which was hated these. It was so dumb about Nadia is now married to his brother. Again, the more they change things, the less I care. Oh, and look, here's Kimi. Isn't it cool to see Kimi again? No, not really. I don't give a fuck. So yeah, this is a very, very bad episode. I don't like it. Anyway, let me get into my final episode of the video, Dr. Linus, which a lot of people, I think, maybe still to this day say is one of the best episodes of the show. I don't know, I looked it up on IMDb and it didn't rate that highly. It was like maybe top 30. But when it first came out, a lot of people were putting this top 10. And no, I'm sorry, but this I mean, again, it's probably with retrospect or whatever, but even so, I think some of the logic used in this episode, because I must admit, I do like the Ben redemption, which is why overall I would say this is a decent episode. It's not a terrible episode, but to say this is great, no way. There's way too many flaws with it. There's moments I like how Miles called Ben out for killing Jacob, and it was really intense when Alana locked him up and made him dig his own grave, and his sort of confession to Alana at the end, where of what happened with his daughter and explaining everything, that was pretty powerful. That made sense. Although it was kind of silly to me that Alana was just like, "Oh yeah, sure, Ben, you're forgiven." I don't know if I bought that completely. Well, I mean, I guess it makes kind of sense because she knows she doesn't want him to go to not luck, but she could always be like, "Oh yes, Ben, you're forgiven, come here," and then when he's not looking, bam, shoot him in the head. But then again, that would be kind of cheap. Story-wise, but it would make sense for the characters. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, I thought the island storyline was decent. I think the strongest point of the episode, the real reason why I probably gave this a 6 rather than a 4 or 5, is the Jack storyline. Again, I'm talking about the Jack character story is my favorite aspect of season 6, and we get this great scene. It really shows what a true believer Jack has become, where he sits with Richard Albert with a piece of dynamite because Albert wants to die, and he sits and he just trusts that it won't, and it doesn't, and he's like, "You want to get another stick?" That was an amazing scene. I still like that scene even in retrospect. Richard Albert's turn to wanting to kill himself, I'm a bit less on board with that, even though I know they do get more, they explain this more in the great episode coming up, Ab Eterno, which I'll cover in the next video. But I don't know, I still wasn't completely on board with it. Now, let me talk about the Flash Sideways, which a lot of people love because they thought it had the Ben's big redemption built to it. But I'm not one of them. I thought this was silly. One of my commenters referred to this as an after-school special. It seems a bit dumb. Oh, a teacher trying to blackmail the principal or whatever. It's just, I don't know, something about it was a bit silly. But let me just jump to what I really want to talk about, is this blackmail scene. Because here's the thing, the show is trying so hard to contrive a situation that mirrors what happened with Alex on that island, where Ben has to choose between Alex's well-being or his power. And they make that very clear throughout it, because there's lots of metaphors that talk about Napoleon and about losing his power when Dr. Linus was doing his lessons. So there's obvious metaphors for that's the whole theme. Problem is, the situation they set up doesn't actually work, because this is not how blackmailing works. This is what I want to say, like Harrison Ford in Force Awakens saying, "That's not how the Force works." I'm going to be like, "That's not how blackmailing works." Okay, so what happened? I think I got into arguments with people about this, but I still firmly stand behind this. What happens at the end is, so Dr. Linus goes to Principal Asshole, whatever. I can't remember what his name was, but it's funny. He always played the asshole guy, not necessarily the villain, but the asshole guy in a lot of '80s movies like Ghostbusters and Die Hard and a couple other things. It was interesting to see him pop up here as Principal Asshole. But anyway, he goes to Principal Asshole and it's like, gonna blackmail him because it has this incriminating evidence that proves he's having an affair, which would not only hurt his career but severely damage, perhaps even end his marriage. And so he is in a dire situation. So what does the asshole guy do? He's like, "Oh, Ben, I got another trump card. I have this thing from Alex, and I could trash her career." I'm sorry, but that's not how blackmailing works, because Ben could simply say, "All right, I'm going to make that another condition. You have to write her a letter of recommendation or I'm going to destroy your career. Because Ben is still holding all the cards. He doesn't want his career destroyed. He's not going to be like, oh, well, fuck you. I'm going to torch Alex. And like, fine, go right ahead, torch her. And then you're going to lose your wife, you're going to lose your career, your life will be ruined. Will that really be worth losing Alex? Ben is and I guess maybe you could argue that makes sense for his character because he's portrayed as kind of a putz, that he would fall for that bullshit, that he's a horrible blackmailer, but that's not how blackmailing works. Ben still holds all the fucking cards. And I've heard a counter argument that no, it's saying that if Ben goes ahead and blackmail him, then he will counter with torching Alex's career. But the thing is, if Ben was smart, he would know that he wouldn't. The whole point of blackmail is that you don't succumb. He's not going to let Ben destroy his career, so it's never going to get to the point where he torches Alex's career in return, because he won't have to, because he knows. But Ben is like, oh, I guess he's holding that, Ben can't torch the principal's career because he knows that if he does so, Alex will lose her career. But Ben also knows that he's never going to let it get to that point in the first place. I don't know. It does get a bit convoluted. I just think it was very convoluted. I'm going to counter blackmail you. That's not really how blackmailing works. I'm sorry. I think the whole thing is, and plus, okay, it creates an insincere situation where they're trying to say, as I said, to compare it to the island, but that actually wasn't the case in the actual island storyline either. And they tried to present it this way in season 5 as well, that Ben let Alex die because he didn't lose his power, and that's what they restate over and over again in this episode, that Ben let Alex die because he was afraid of losing his power, which actually, you watch season 4, that's not the case. He didn't let Alex die for, first of all, he thought that she wouldn't die because he thought there were rules, whatever the fuck that means, that would prevent Kimi from killing her. But it turned out to be wrong about that, so he had this faith in these rules, so you could say it was his faith in the island that let him make the mistakes, but but it wasn't his power. Also, he was under the very strong belief that if he gave in to Kimi and turned himself in like Kimi wanted, Kimi would kill her anyway, and he would kill everyone else. So to say that he let her die to keep his power is completely inaccurate. It does not at all describe the scene. And just like this whole thing, this is his redemption because he's choosing Alex over his own power this time, which again, he doesn't really have to. He could have his cake and eat it too, because that's not how blackmailing works. But yeah, so that whole thing really annoyed me. So no way is this a great episode, but as I said, it was kind of decent. I did like Ben's sort of redemption arc, which, yeah, I'll talk about more in the spoiler section. Anyway, so Dr. Linus is okay. So anyway, that is it. That's it for my coverage of the first 7 episodes of season 6, or at least the spoiler-free section. So if you haven't seen all the way up to the end of season 6, you will want to stop this video now. And thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out my channel for many more reviews on Lost and other shows like The Expanse and Star Trek. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching. But if you have seen all the way to the end of season 6, you can follow me to my spoiler section, which will begin now. So let's start with LAX. You notice in my spoiler-free section I didn't talk about the statue being underwater. Because to me, this is something I talked about in another season 6, a couple other Lost videos I did, is that I am under the very, very strong belief that when they first started writing this season, the Flash sideways is something different than it turned out to be. I do believe that they had originally planned for it to be an actual parallel universe, but when this got such strong negative reactions to the aspect of a parallel universe. I think they changed their mind. I think the studio creators, someone involved, panicked and it's like, no, you have to give the fans what they want. And there's this purgatory theory that's been going around since the first season they seem to like, so why don't you make that the Flash sideways instead of this parallel universe thing? And I'm really of a very strong belief that this is the case, that halfway through the season, around episodes, I'd say 12 or 13, because I do believe that some of these episodes, the later episodes in the season, weren't written when these first episodes started airing. It's not like later, newer, more recent shows like Game of Thrones where the entire season's written before anyone sees any of the episodes. I think because this is spread out over a longer time, I don't think that was the case. I do think the audience saw these first batch of episodes before they wrote the last batch, or at least in the process of writing the last batch. And I do think they completely changed directions at the last second. I'll get more into that when I'll cover the last batch of season 6. But here, this is a big, the statue underwater is a big clue. That's probably the biggest thing that makes me think this is the case, because as it stands, with the ending where you find out this is some sort of afterlife, this scene makes no sense whatsoever. It does not fit. In fact, it actively contradicts the thought that this is an afterlife. Okay, so they're not clear on what this afterlife is and that's purpose. They say, oh, it's up to the viewer to decide. But really, I think it's because they don't fucking know themselves. And they couldn't make it clear with it making any sense. So it's like, oh, let's leave it vague. That way we can say it's abstract and people have to figure it out themselves when really they just don't know what the fuck they're doing. But the one thing they did say was very clear is that they weren't dead the whole time. Like, the entire show was an afterlife, and believe you me, I'll get more into this in later videos. That's the one thing they made very clear. But what this actual, otherwise what the Flash sideways are, they leave open to interpretation. Like, I had theories that it was actually a parallel universe, but it allowed people to reconnect. Like, the dead from one universe somehow reconnected with the other people, and they went to the church and they all went to the afterlife together. But after they left, then the people who actually belonged in that universe resumed their normal lives. That's the theory I had. Not a lot of people like that theory. Most people will tell you that it's actually just a fake universe that was created from pixie dust, I guess. No one ever explains. There's nothing in the show to indicate anything that would create this, but anyway, that just created out of nowhere, that allowed these people on the island to reconnect, and then once they left the church, that universe was no more. And that theory, the statue underwater completely contradicts that theory. Because if the case is true that this universe isn't really a universe, it's just an afterlife that's just there for Jack and the survivors, and so therefore people like Jack's son and other people like that aren't real. They're just like images in this imagined world for the characters to experience and come to terms with their issues before they move on to the afterlife. And the reason why the statue underwater contradicts this is because if this was the case, that this wasn't a real universe and things only exist for the purpose of these characters, then nothing would exist outside their perspective. And this scene that we see is outside their perspective. No character in the show is seeing this. The audience is shown this as existing outside of the perspective of any of the characters. Like, nobody knows that the island is sunk and is underwater. We are shown this as a God's eye view. Therefore, if this was a fake afterlife that didn't really exist outside these people's perspective, then this wouldn't happen. So this directly contradicts, and this really makes. And plus, this is never explained. Even if you leave that aspect of contradicting the afterlife, even if you say, oh, maybe it is an actual place that does exist for the people, what the fuck does the statue underwater have to do with anything? Because it is definitely played off. And I remember being so excited by this. Like, wow, this is an amazing, shocking moment. And now I'm so massively disappointed because they didn't do anything with it. They did jack shit. It turns out to be completely and totally irrelevant. And they played it off as it was this big shocking twist that would come back to haunt you and have this big revelation. Holy shit, why is the island underwater? What's going on? Holy shit. But it ends up meaning nothing. In fact, as I said, it contradicts what they actually do end up revealing. So this is part of the reason why I think that they didn't plan. That they originally planned for this to be a parallel universe, and they originally planned for the statue to be underwater to mean something, which is why they made such a big reveal of it, and they just changed their minds halfway through the season, or a third of the way through, or 2/3 of the way through the season, because they were freaking out because people didn't like what they were doing, and they thought it was too confusing. Well, personally, I would have rather they stick to a parallel universe thing than this whole afterlife bullshit. But I'll get more into why that's a failure, as I said, in my later episodes, in later videos. Now, the other thing that I think contradicts is that the whole thing with Sawyer and Juliet. Now, this is another thing I got into huge arguments with people because they thought it was perfectly circumdicular because right before Juliet dies, she says she repeats the lines that she ends up saying to Sawyer in the Flash Sideways in the finale about we could go Dutch. And that thing she says it works when Sawyer's trying to get the vending machine to work, and she has this trick to get it to work, and then she says it works. And so people always be like, well, when she said it works in this episode, that was just a callback to her Flash Sideways thing, just like she's going Dutch or whatever. But that actually doesn't make any fucking sense because Juliet doesn't say it works to Sawyer. That's not what happens. What happens is she says, I have something really, really important to tell you. And then she dies. And then later, like, Sawyer forces Miles to read her mind or whatever to see what her last thing she wanted to tell him. And all his Miles says is, it works. Now, why is that something really, really important? That a vending machine works. It's not. If she had something really, really important to tell him, it would be, hey, there's this cool afterlife where we're going to meet up again, so don't fret, don't be sad, because we're meeting up again in this new afterlife, and it's going to be very important. But that's not. Miles would have. She's reading her mind, so that's what he would have read, and that's what he would have told Sawyer. Not it works. It works clearly refers to their attempts to reset the timeline, because I do believe at this stage in the show that they had intended this to be a reset of the timeline, but they were going to go by Star Trek 2009 rules, which is shortly after that movie came out, where if you change the timeline, it creates a splinter timeline, an alternate reality, rather than affecting the one and only timeline like Back to the Future. And I think that would actually be sound time travel logic, because that's normally you can't change anything, like whatever happened, but if you do something, like to use the analogy with boulders, whatever, you just do something so huge that the universe can't course correct to it, it is going to change things. But rather than being a Back to the Future situation where it changes the one and only timeline, it creates a splinter timeline. And to me, that makes a fuck ton more sense than there just conveniently being an afterlife that just conveniently happens to be the exact situation they were trying to set up where they didn't, where the plane never crashed. Like, that is too coincidental, and that is, and I talked about this in other videos, that some people say, oh, you don't understand, that's just a fake out. No, a fake out, a successful fake out's like The Sixth Sense, and spoilers for The Sixth Sense, is like a successful fake out is when you go back, you look at it, and you can see the whole time that Bruce Willis was dead the whole time, and it makes sense, and it fits perfectly. if you were to equate the situation here, if you say, oh no, this is a fake out of why this alternate reality where the plane never crashes is actually just an afterlife, the equivalent to The Sixth Sense would be if you go back and watch it and you see Bruce Willis talking to his wife even though he's supposed to be dead, which doesn't actually match up. That's the equivalent here, because this does not match up. It does not make sense. It does not fit at all. So I am really 100% convinced that when they were writing these episodes, these first 12 or so episodes, they totally intended this to be an alternate reality, an alternate timeline, not a fucking afterlife. I think they course corrected and they changed their minds to try to appease fans, and that's part of the reason why this ending sucked so badly. And that's because it was inconsistent. Not only was it fan service trying to appease the fan theory, which actually just ended up confusing most of the fans and making them think something different than what they were wanting them to think, but also it doesn't work. It's not consistent. Anyway, sorry. So let me move over to what Kate does. I don't know if I really have anything to say about spoilers. I mean, I think I mentioned, like, Ethan and how I was like, ooh, look, there's Ethan, isn't that cool? But it ends up being nothing because this is an afterlife. So if it's an afterlife, who the fuck cares if Ethan's there? Especially if he's not real. Anyway, let me get into the next episode, which is The Substitute. And I guess I'll talk about the... I can talk a bit about young Jacob, because we see him in this, and it's sort of teasing later on. We get the flashbacks of... we get the Cross the Sea, where we get the storyline with young Jacob. It seems like that's the only reason they're doing this, is to tease Across the Sea, because... why? I don't really get why Knotlock would be seeing a vision of young Jacob, and he's like, you know the rules, you can't kill him. Like, that was such a bad line read, by the way. And then him yelling, oh, don't tell me what I can't do. I'm like, oh, come on, he's not Locke, for fuck's sake. Alright, let me get into the next episode, which is The Lighthouse. Yeah, I actually don't think I have anything to say about The Lighthouse, so let's just move on. Let's move on to Sundown. I think I complained about the island storyline enough, but I want to talk about the Flash Sideways a bit, because this is what really irritates me about the Flash Sideways, because they made Nadia Saeed now her married to Saeed's brother, they're trying to push them away, to say, oh, she's not really important to him, and so that's setting up for the end, the last episode, where he goes to the church with Shannon. God damn it! And that is so dumb. They're saying, oh, and we're supposed to believe, oh, don't worry, Nadia wasn't really his true love; it was actually Shannon. Yeah. Yeah, the girl he just had a fling with over like a week or two. That's the true love of his life, and we're supposed to be. And they're doing this because they want to honor season 1 and go back to season 1. And but I'll talk more about that when I cover the end. It's dumb and I hate it. Anyway, let me now get into Dr. Linus, and I guess I'll talk about Widmore coming to the island. I don't know, I'll cover this more in my coming videos, but this was such a disappointment, the way they handled Widmore, and that's what I noticed, like, watching this episode again and saying, oh, it's this huge reveal, Widmore's coming to the island, and I don't know, it's just, everything is poorly handled, so I guess I don't actually have much to say about spoilers in that regard. So anyway, that is all I got for spoilers, so I'll see you guys in 2 weeks, for my coverage of the part 2 of season 6. Thanks so much for watching.